If you got a Bible that you can open up or power up, meet me in John 1 today. John chapter 1 is where we'll be today. I would say Merry Christmas to you. I don't want to freak you out. You got a couple of days. So actually, I love these couple of days, right between. You know, it's like the Christmas concerts and the parties and all of the stuff is starting to kind of wind down, and then it's go time, you know? So it's like the calm after the storm, right before the storm is these days, and it's good to see you. So Merry Christmas, glad you're here. I love a lot about this time of year. Normally, I don't like the fact that it gets dark so early, but I like it for these couple of days because it gives me just a chance to, when it's quiet in the evening, just sit in the living room and the glow of the Christmas tree lights and give my full attention to guessing what's inside all of the gifts under the tree that have my name on it. Yeah, and anybody else? Like when it's quiet and nobody else is around, you can do a little weight test or give it a little shake and sort of try to figure it out. It's okay to not admit that's you. If your spouse is sitting next to you, if your parents are sitting right there next to you, my wife is on to me at this point. So, and I came by it honestly. I learned it from my dad. I've told somebody this before. Like my dad's good at lots of stuff. He is almost supernaturally good at guessing what his gifts are under the tree. It's almost like he's got the spiritual gift of gift guessing. My dad does. So we would always try to fake him out when we were kids and, you know, put small things in big boxes or put weights in the box and disguise it so that he wouldn't know what it was, even putting a note in the box with a weight so that he would pick it up and feel it and not get it and the real gift was someplace else. He would always guess it. And we stopped doing it. I think after 1 year, we got a wrong size box and wrapped it up. We put a weight in it and put it under the tree. And he looked at the tree and he said, give me that big box over there with the weights and the note inside that says there's a new jacket for me hidden someplace in the house. Like I never could understand exactly how he did it. It took me a long time to figure out his gifts for guessing gifts. And then I finally figured it out. It's that he's notoriously terrible to buy for. He's so hard to buy for, and he knows it. So he knows when it gets close to Christmas time, and he casually mentions that he'd seen a new tool that he thought was pretty cool. Or when he'd walk through a store with my mom and say, "You think I need a new jacket like that?" It was like he was throwing raw meat to hungry lions. You know, he knew exactly what was happening. So he would just keep track of all of those hints that he dropped out there and then do a little process of elimination when he looked under the tree on Christmas morning. So I think we only ever really stumped him one time growing up. He'd only dropped one hint that year, and it was something that was right at the top of the price range, and he knew it was the one thing that he needed, the one thing that he wanted, so he only gave us one hint. But when he looked under the tree, there were multiple presents and all had his name on it. And he picked them up and shook them and felt the weight over the days leading up to Christmas, and he just couldn't figure it out. It didn't feel like an oversized box. It didn't feel like something that was, you know, weighted with a note inside of it. And so he just couldn't figure out what it was. And what we had done is take the one thing that he wanted, the one thing that he had needed, and we'd broken it into little different pieces. And we'd wrapped all of the pieces up in individual boxes with little pieces or just little clues that would point to the thing that he'd been asking for. But it wasn't until all of the pieces that were put together that he could start to see clearly that what he had received that Christmas was exactly what he'd wanted and the one thing that he felt like he needed that year. Sometimes you can only see the full truth after you've assembled all the clues. When Jesus was born into a stable in Bethlehem, wrapped up in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger, at first glance, sort of felt like the gift for everyone that was anything but what everyone wanted for Christmas. I mean, think about all of the people that had the chance to receive that. There's this scared, young, unmarried couple in a barn, surrounded by animals because their extended family were all headed to Bethlehem. And even the innkeepers at the motels in town couldn't find a place for this young couple, their unexpected baby. It certainly wasn't what they thought they'd been asking for Christmas. The Romans, the Greeks, they were on a search for truth with a capital T. And knowledge behind the universe. They certainly weren't looking in mangers for that. The religious leaders, they were looking for a revolutionary. They weren't looking for an infant. Ordinary people, like you and me in Israel, they were taxed to oblivion. They were just trying to figure out their next step to afford every day, put food on the table. And all of the busyness of the life that they lived, they weren't looking in a stable. Shepherds, they were looking for threats to their livelihood in the night. Magi, they were looking for signs in the heavens. And the devout, they were just trying to keep the rules, showing up at synagogue every single week and offer the sacrifices they could to just keep them just ahead of their sins. Even the people that saw the signs, even the people that read the clues, they couldn't put all of the pieces together. Nobody was searching all of the babies in Bethlehem in those days to see which one it was that was the hope of the world. So it's John, looking back, who helps us put all of the pieces together to show us how a baby wrapped in swaddling clothes is the culmination of all of the clues, all of the pieces, all of the promises, and all of the hopes and all of the dreams of all of the people in all of the places at all time. What looked unremarkable, lying in a manger, was actually the gift that everyone had been longing for. He was just wrapped differently than anyone expected. John helps us unwrap it and put together the clues. Look at John chapter 1, verse 1. John says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent or of human decision or of a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John the Apostle was a genius, but he'd have flunked high school English. He begins the story, the biography, the eyewitness account of Jesus' life by mixing metaphors that he never really defines or clarifies for us. He actually mixes several different metaphors, but there are two that stand out right here and a third big one that comes a little bit later. You see the first big one in verse 1. Look back there. It says, "In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God." But then verse 2, John makes it clear that when he's talking about the Word, he's not talking about a what. He's talking about a who. John says he was with God in the beginning. He tells us that this put together, wrapped up baby in a manger is the one that all of the clues pointed to from the very beginning. See, a lot of times our Christmas stories, when we tell them, they start with the shepherds, maybe start with the wise men or start with the angels appearing to Mary. But John wants to make sure that you know that the story of Christmas goes back well before that. He rewinds the tape all the way back to the beginning of everything that's anything in the beginning. It's the first 3 words of Genesis. First 3 words of the scriptures. And in fact, if you'll put up with a little bit of geeking out over the Greek language here, the way that John wrote this is a take your breath away way to write this. The word was in verse 1. It's written in what's called in Greek the imperfect tense. It's a way to describe a present action that was still going on in the past. So when John says, in the beginning, the word was, what he is literally saying is, in the beginning, the Word had been being. So however you think about the beginning of everything that's anything, John says when time started ticking, when the Big Bang banged, when light burst forth out of darkness, in that moment at the beginning, Jesus had already been being. Okay, so think about that for just a second. This is John, the apostle, the disciple, reflecting back as an eyewitness on the whole life of Jesus. He's the one that knew Jesus probably as well as anybody else on the planet during that time. This is the man that Jesus trusted to take care of his mother when he died. And as he tells his story, he wants you to know where he believes that Jesus' story begins. When you rewind creation all the way back to its very first moment, in that moment, John says Jesus had already been being. Okay, so that's worth considering, at least just for a second, maybe. I mean, think about your best friend in the world. Think about your best friend on earth. What would it take for your best friend on earth to convince you that he or she was the always and forever eternal God of the universe? John says, in the beginning of the beginning, this man that I have walked with and cried with and eaten with and slept near and talked with and learned from in all kinds of different moments is and has always been God. So I would just say, you may not believe that, what John believes, but it's fairly compelling testimony that he believes it, isn't it? After everything that he saw with his own eyes and heard with his own ears. John chooses a metaphor to describe this baby who came into the world wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. He says, Jesus is the Word, which is a strange leading metaphor, yes? Why does John call Jesus the Word? And maybe for a couple of reasons. So first, maybe to think about is this: your word is the clearest, truest, most specific revelation that you can give somebody about who you genuinely are. This is why you would be an idiot if you hire somebody based only on what you see on their boilerplate resume, because you need their word. Now, I asked some experts on this week, some of our residents. This is gold. Lydia, Faith, Paxton. They all said this is why we would not just marry a guy based on his Hinge or Bumble or FarmersOnly.com profile. If we're going to go on a date, you should go on a date with him. If you want to go on a date with him, you're going to have to go on a date. They're going to ask you, single guys, you should go on a date with them. They're going to say, hey, tell me about yourself. You're going to have to use your words. That's how they find out who you really are. Word is the clearest, most specific revelation you can give somebody about who you really are. John's saying the same thing about Jesus here. You want to know what God is like? You want truth about God, not just rumors, not just speculation, not just your spidey sense, not just hot takes or big opinions. You want to know what God is like? John says, listen to Jesus. He's the Word of God, the clearest, most specific revelation of what God is like and who He is. See, God didn't just send an email. He didn't just write a book. He didn't just show ambiguous signs in the sky. God came in flesh. That's what incarnation means. When you think about chili con carne, chili with meat, God's message to humanity didn't show up as vegetable soup for the religious soul. The incarnation is God's revelation to us with skin on. And this would have hit everybody in John's world. This is what they were longing for. Like the Greeks and the Romans, they were looking for ultimate truth with a capital T. They were looking for the ultimate logic behind the universe. John says, here he is. The religious leaders, they were looking for God's authority. They were looking for God's power, his final word on everything. John says it's not in a law. It's not in a temple, not in a ritual, not in a religious system of some kind. The power and the authority that initiated the whole universe has arrived in person. God's not a what. He's a who, here in flesh, to speak into the world that he spoke into existence. Jesus is the Word. But you notice, he didn't just come to speak into the world. He also came to shine in the darkness. You see that in verses 4 and 5? John says, in him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So John says this baby, wrapped in swaddling clothes, laying there in the manger, is the Word. He's also the light. Jesus is the light. So I got to thinking about this week. Carrie and I joke about this at our house a lot. She's pretty convinced that darkness doesn't actually exist on earth, at least when she's trying to sleep. She needs total and complete darkness in order to sleep, and she has never found it. I always tell her, it's really cool. God designed us with these like built-in darkness makers called eyelids. And you just put them down and boom, instant darkness. So Carrie, on the other hand, believes to her core that she was created with abnormally thin eyelids. She swears she can see the little indicator light on the smoke alarm even through her thin eyelids and an eye mask while she's trying to sleep at night. Like she's never experienced darkness. It's a struggle at our house. But even aside from people with that extremely rare medical condition, most of us have never really experienced darkness. We think of light in the darkness, we think of a little nightlight that we plug in the wall to help us so we don't stub our toe on the way to the bathroom in the middle of the night, right? Light in the darkness. In the Bible, light in the darkness is never that tame. It's never the idea the world is a moderately hard place to navigate without a little Jesus flashlight to show us our way around in it. It's a lot more dire than that when the Bible talks about darkness. It talks about darkness as ignorance, like the inability to know who God is or who we are in the dark. It talks about it as despair, the idea that we can't find hope and the sense that we never will. Talks about darkness as blindness, where we don't see life in front of us the way that life truly is. And talks about it as bondage, where we're stuck in these cycles that we can't see our way out of. John says that's exactly where light goes. Light doesn't help anybody if it just stays outside the room. It only overcomes darkness by entering into it. John says that's important. It's important for you to know about Jesus. God did not just stay at a safe distance and shout words into the dark. He stepped into the darkness, despair, and blindness and ignorance and bondage. Jesus didn't just come to describe a path. He came to walk it in front of us and alongside us, whatever the path leads through. And wherever the path leads to show us what it really looks like to be fully alive, to live life fully human, fully connected to the life that God designed for us and the one who designed that life. Jesus shows us. See, if all you got is the Word, it's like having instructions to some assembly required gift, but having to put it together wearing a blindfold. Like even with all the instructions in the world, you have to have illumination. You need truth with a capital T that you can see lived out in front of you. Even if you got thin eyelids, right? You need the Word and the light working together. John says Jesus is the Word of God and the light of God. But think just for a second, okay? If that's all Jesus is, he may be the Christmas gift that we want to receive from God, light and Word, but he's certainly not the gift that we need. If all we've got is a teacher, think, all we've got is truth that we can't put all together. If all we've got is a light, we've got an example without any context. If all we've got is God's command and God's example, we're in deeper trouble than we ever imagined because we can't just plead ignorance to the way of God anymore. Our greatest problem, right, is not that we don't know truth. It's not that we can't see the way. Our greatest problem is that we've heard the word and we've seen the light and we've chosen to ignore him or to turn away from him. See, we don't just need a teacher. We don't just need a moral example. The word reveals God's heart, but it can't undo the ways that we've ignored it on its own. The light shows us the path, but it can't erase the places that we've wandered away from it. So look, we don't just need guidance. We need grace. We don't just need direction. We need to be delivered. We need the word. We need the light. And we have to have a lamb. That's where John takes us next. It's almost like he knows this tension that he's created within us. The Romans and the Greeks, the priests and the scribes and the shepherd and the wise men and the lonely, scared, unmarried couple and the average, everyday person just trying to put it all together in Israel in those days, they still don't have all they need in the word and the light. So John, the disciple, flashes us forward to the moment when Jesus steps onto the scene as an adult and introduces us to another John. John the Baptizer, John the Baptist. He's been there teaching about Jesus. And in fact, points back to the beginning. Look at verse 15. John, this is John the Baptist, testified concerning him. He cried out saying, "This is the one I spoke about when I said, 'He who comes after me has surpassed me because he was before me.'" The religious leaders in verse 19 sent people to say to him, "This is what we expected the word to sound like. When we listened to you talk, John, this is what we thought was coming." Is it you that God's promised? We're trying to put together the clues. John says, "No, I sound like what you expected, but I'm not the one God gave." They thought as they looked that he was the kind of prophet that would lead them through the wilderness. And so we're looking at, it sure looks like what we expected. And the word and the light together. Look at verse 29. The next day, John saw Jesus coming and toward him and said, "Look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." So notice, John doesn't say, "Behold, the teacher." He doesn't say, "Look, the consultant." He doesn't say, "Behold, the life coach." Even, "Behold, the great religious leader, the great moral example." He says the light and the word is the Lamb. And that's how it all fits together. See, without the Lamb, the word and the light become a law that will crush us, not a gospel that will bring us hope. When you've heard the word and you've seen the light, you're forced to confront something really uncomfortable about yourself. What we needed was not just more information. What we needed was more than just inspiration wrapped up for us from heaven. We need intervention from heaven on our behalf. The Jewish readers were familiar with this. And sacrifices were their solution for sin. And it was a really graphic picture if you think about it. At least once a year, you'd go to the temple and you'd take a spotless lamb and you would put your hand on that lamb, on its head, while the priest took a knife to its neck, symbolically saying, by putting your hand on the head of that lamb, "This ought to be me. This is what I deserve from God for the way that I've strayed from the path and the commands that I've ignored. This is what I deserve." Symbolically saying this should be me, but everybody knew that it wasn't you. and that it wouldn't be, because it wasn't a one-for-one payment. Like, the best that a lamb could ever provide is a payment on the minimum balance. A lamb couldn't take away the full debt. It's not a one-for-one sacrifice. If God was going to take away sin, he had to step into the human condition that sin broke. And there were clues all along that he would. In fact, can I show you my favorite one, or at least tell you about my favorite one? I hadn't seen it until this year. I read a book called The Paradise King by Blaine Eldridge, which is terrific if you're looking for some good holiday reading that'll make you love Jesus more. The Paradise King by Blaine Eldridge. In one of the chapters, he walks back through the story of Abraham and Isaac. You remember that story? Genesis chapter 22, Abraham's waited for a son for a really long time, and God finally gives him a son and then says to him, I want you to take that son, I want you to sacrifice him. And Abraham walks up the mountain with his son. And you remember his son, Isaac, asks Abraham a question. You remember the question? He says, hey, Dad, where's the lamb? Remember that? Remember what Abraham tells Isaac, his son? He says, God will provide the lamb for the sacrifice. And then you remember what happens? Isaac climbs up on the altar. Abraham gets ready to obey God, and then he looks over to the trees and he sees something caught in the bushes. And what does he see? God had provided but it wasn't, was it? What was it that was caught in the thicket? It wasn't a lamb, it was a ram. And come on, I know we're city folk. But a lamb and a ram are not the same thing. And in The Paradise King, Eldridge points out that a good Jewish reader would never have missed that. It's a loose end in the story. God had provided a sacrifice, but it wasn't the sacrifice that was promised. Abraham kept looking for the lamb. Isaac kept looking for the lamb. Jacob and Joseph and Moses, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Haggai, Malachi, shepherds, priests, wise men, lonely, scared, unmarried couples who had been shamed out of their home, and even local motels kept looking for the lamb until Christmas. John the Baptist declared, as John the disciple looked back, he wanted to make sure that you know that Jesus is not just the truth about God. He's not just an example from God. He's the sacrifice that all of us have been longing for. The one that we desperately need, but would never have put together on our own unless God had bundled together, wrapped in swaddling clothes, showed up in person in the manger. This is where John pulls it all together. The word reveals God to us. The light shows the way for us. The lamb can take away all of our sin. All of the pieces come wrapped together in one infant-sized gift that very first Christmas. But listen, none of that matters at all if you just leave the gift sitting there. In fact, John tells us where he's hoping you'll land this Christmas, what he's hoping you'll see this year. Look at verse 9. It says, the true light gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. They were looking at all of the different pieces, longing for something that they couldn't quite put together, just like my dad sitting by the Christmas tree. Verse 11, he came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. So look, it's one thing to see the clues. It's one thing to hear the message. It's one thing to long for a final solution to the brokenness within you and all around you. But if you never received the gift you've been given, you will leave the one thing you want, the one thing you need the most, right there on the table, even though it's been in arm's reach the whole time. That's where some of us find ourselves this morning. Look, you've been around the story maybe for a long time. admired Jesus from a distance, maybe even accepted some of his teaching, but you've never actually received him. Never transferred the weight of your trust from whatever you'd been trusting before to the fullness of who he promises to be. Never said, Jesus, I trust your word to me. Be my light. I believe that you are my lamb who made a full and complete payment for my sin. Here's the Christmas invitation. Don't just admire Jesus this Christmas. Apply his promise to you. Don't just hear his word. Trust him. Don't just see the light. Step into it. Don't just appreciate the lamb. Let him take away your sin. That's the gift behind every other gift this Christmas, the thing that brings everything together. Though you might not have expected it to show up like this, may not have expected everything you need to show up as him, John's saying, look really closely at what it is that's been wrapped and placed in the manger. He brings the pieces together. He's everything you'd expected, everything you'd hoped for, everything you've longed for, wrapped in the only way he could come, even if it's in the manner that you least expected. Would you bow your head with me? If you've never put your trust in Christ, if you've never believed in him, as John said, you've never received that gift, you can do that right where you sit today. And John tells you how. It's not about doing a religious ritual. It's not about showing up in a location. He says, to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to be called children of God. You can do that right where you sit. It's as simple in the privacy of your heart. Tell God, I believe the promise is for me. Not just us generically, but to me personally. I believe that Jesus shows the way that I could never walk. I believe that he's the Lamb who takes away the sins of the world, that he could take away all of my sin, come to live with me and within me and walk beside me everywhere I go to give me eternal life and abundant life forever.
Hey, thanks for watching. If something you heard resonated with you today, we would love to connect with you. Visit doxology.church/connect or leave a comment below. And if you enjoyed today's message and you want to see more, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new videos.